The moon rises over Constantinople already in shadow. May 22nd, 1453. The Ottoman army has held its positions outside the walls for 47 days. The eclipse is partial. Modern astronomical records confirm the magnitude at 0.7446. The moon rises already darkened, and every defender on the walls sees it at the same moment. The Venetian surgeon Niccolò Barbaro is among them. His diary records the response. The defenders recognized the prophecy at once. A text circulating for generations predicted this moment precisely. When the moon gives a sign in the sky, Constantinople will fall to the Turks within a few days. Constantine XI Palaiologos stands on the walls of the Blackenay sector. Barbaro records his response. No emergency order follows, no revised defensive plan. The emperor accepts what the eclipse has confirmed. The city has 7 days. The question is why the most prophesied city in medieval Christendom could not convert its own Omen archive into preparation. The Eastern Roman Empire, the state its citizens still called Rome, entered its final dynastic phase in 1261. The Palaiologos dynasty reconstituted the empire after 57 years of Latin occupation. It governed for another 192 years until the 29th of May, 1453. By that morning, the empire was the city. Constantinople held Thrace to its west and remnants of the Morea in the Peloponnese. Everything else had passed to the Ottomans or to Italian merchant republics. What Constantinople held, Byzantium was. 4 Greek writers recorded the fall. George Sphrantzes served as courtier and minister to the last 3 emperors. He is the only one among them who witnessed the siege. His Chronicon Minus covers the period 1401 to 1477. Ducas compiled his Turco-Byzantine history from eyewitness accounts. He was not present at the fall but drew closely on those who were. Launikos Chalkokondyles wrote 10 books on the rise of the Ottomans, modelling his approach consciously on Herodotus. Michael Critobulus wrote from the Ottoman side, framing Mehmed II in Thucydidean terms. A 5th witness, the Venetian surgeon Niccolò Barbaro, kept a diary in Italian. Runciman's 1965 study identifies Barbaro's diary as the chronological skeleton to which all other accounts must be fitted. This episode does not reconstruct the Ottoman campaign in depth. The diagnostic question is narrower: why the Byzantine prophetic tradition failed to function as a warning system. This episode adopts Jonathan Harris's reading of the fall. In The End of Byzantium, Harris argues the fall was a failure of adaptive capacity. The prophetic framework blocked political mobilization that accurate information could otherwise have produced. Roger Crowley's account in 1453 focuses on the military technological picture. Donald Nicol, in The Last Centuries of Byzantium, argues the fall was materially overdetermined long before it occurred. The military and geopolitical conditions are real. The diagnostic focus here is on the framework operating inside them. Constantinople's defences, by the standards of medieval siege warfare, were formidable. The Theodosian walls ran for 14 kilometres along the city's western land approach. Theodosius II completed them between 408 and 450 of the Common Era. The system was triple-layered, an outer moat, a lower outer wall rising roughly 6 metres, and an inner wall reaching 12 metres with towers at 20. The walls had withstood 13 major sieges across a millennium. Critobulus describes the system in detail before the 1453 assault and presents it as a permanent defence. The structural problem was embedded in that assumption. The walls had been engineered for pre-gunpowder siege warfare. They could be repaired between bombardments. They could not be fundamentally reconfigured against artillery. The assumption that they constituted permanent protection made defenders consistently underweight a technologically different threat. The city's second asset was theological. Constantinople was the Theopolis, the god-protected city, in institutional ideology rather than merely popular belief. The ecumenical patriarchate resided there. The city held the Hodegetria icon, attributed by tradition to St. Luke. The Pseudo-Methodius apocalypse, circulating in court and ecclesiastical culture from the 8th century onward, encoded a specific promise. At the moment of the empire's greatest crisis, a last Roman emperor would arise and restore Christendom. The oracles of Leo the Wise, circulating from the 9th century, reinforced the framework. These were not fringe documents. Emperors and patriarchs consulted them. The processional tradition around the Hodegetria had a documented record of results. The Akathistos hymn commemorates the Avar Persian siege of 626 of the Common Era, when the city attributed its survival to the Virgin's intercession. That commemoration was rehearsed annually. The structural cost of this theological authority was that it was inversely proportional to political flexibility. Any action compromising Orthodox identity was blocked by the same theology that promised protection. The third asset was the diplomatic tradition. Byzantine survival had been, for centuries, primarily a diplomatic achievement. The empire had maintained its position through treaty-making, dynastic marriage, tribute payments, and the exploitation of rivalries. Harris documents this record in the end of Byzantium. Emperor John VIII personally attended the Council of Florence in 1438 to negotiate church union in exchange for a Western crusade. Constantine XI sent envoys to Venice, Genoa, Hungary, and the papacy through 1452 and into 1453. The tradition required something to offer. By 1453, the last tradable asset was church union with Rome. The city's theology made that asset undeliverable. The fourth asset was the record of survival itself. The Eastern Roman state had endured for over a millennium. It had outlasted the Western Empire by nearly 1,000 years. 2 Ottoman sieges had failed. Bayezid I's siege of 1394 to 1402 ended when Timur's forces destroyed the Ottoman army at Ankara. Murad II's siege of 1422 was repulsed. Each survival updated the inference that divine rescue would come again. That inference was not irrational given the record. Each prior defense had relied on a functioning professional army, a solvent treasury, unchallenged sea control, and Anatolian tax revenues. By 1453, none of these conditions obtained. The city was defending on the memory of its defenses. The appearance of strength and the forensic record diverge at 1204. On the 12th of April of that year, the forces of the Fourth Crusade entered Constantinople and sacked the city for 3 days. The Latin Empire of Constantinople occupied the city from 1204 to 1261. During that occupation, the accumulated treasury was stripped. Anatolian landholdings were redistributed to Venetian and Crusader lords. Venice secured trade privileges that permanently restructured Byzantine commercial capacity. Harris and Nicol both treat 1204 as the event from which full recovery was impossible. Michael VIII Palaiologos reconstituted the empire in 1261. The restoration produced a permanently fragmented territorial base and a fiscal architecture that transferred customs revenues to foreign merchants. By the 13th century, the Genoese colony at Galata collected more customs income than the imperial treasury. Galata sits directly across the Golden Horn from Constantinople. The revenue contraction accelerated across the Palaiologan period. State revenues under Basil II around 1025 of the Common Era have been estimated at 5 to 6 million numismata annually. By 1400, Nicol's analysis of the fiscal record places revenues in the low hundreds of thousands of hyperpyra annually. The precise figure carries uncertainty, as the monetary systems resist direct comparison, but the direction is unambiguous. The Anatolian interior, which had supplied the bulk of Byzantine agricultural and military revenue, was gone by the mid-14th century. The professional army paid from those revenues had ceased to exist. The mechanism that eliminated the Anatolian base was partly self-generated. The Byzantine civil wars of 1321 to 1328 and 1341 to 1347 accelerated Ottoman presence in Europe by a mechanism the combatants did not intend. John VI Cantacuzenius used Ottoman soldiers under Orhan Gazi as proxies in the 1341 to 1347 conflict. Those forces crossed into the Balkans. They did not leave. Chalkokandiles and Dukas both trace permanent Ottoman presence in Europe to the Cantacuzino Civil War. Harris identifies it as the single most consequential Byzantine miscalculation of the century. Each faction made a rational tactical calculation. The aggregate structural consequence was not part of any party's plan. The demographic record measures what fiscal collapse and civil war produced together. The city had held approximately 400,000 people in the 12th century. By the 1450s, Runciman and Crowley both cite a population of between 40,000 and 50,000. In early 1453, Sphrantzes conducted a census of available defenders. He found approximately 4,983 Greeks capable of bearing arms. Foreign allies, primarily Genoese and Venetian, added perhaps 2,000 more. The total garrison stood at approximately 7,000 to 7,100 men. 14 miles of walls, one defender per 10 meters of perimeter. The Western military option closed 9 years before the siege. On the 10th of November 1444, the Battle of Varna destroyed the last Hungarian-led crusade capable of reaching Constantinople. The commander Władysław III died in the field. Harris identifies Varna as the point after which Western military rescue was no longer a realistic prospect. Constantine XI, who became emperor in 1449, knew this when he took the throne. 2 final signals arrived in 1452 and received no adequate response. Between March and August of that year, Mehmed II constructed Rumeli-Hisara. The fortress sat at the narrowest point of the Bosphorus, 4 miles from the city walls. Combined with the existing Ottoman fortress across the strait, it closed Byzantine access to Black Sea grain supplies. In the same period, Urban, a Hungarian gunsmith, offered his cannon-building services to the Byzantine court. The court could not afford him. He contracted with Mehmed instead. Critobulus and Ducas both record the resulting weapon. It was approximately 27 feet long and capable of firing stone balls at ranges exceeding a mile. The Mesotetian, the lowest-lying stretch of the Triple Land Wall, would become its primary target. Constantine XI responded to Rumeli-Hisara with diplomatic protests. The garrison was not reinforced. The walls were not re-engineered. The structural assumptions held. The material record, compiled across 2 centuries and confirmed in 6 specific indicators, tells one story. The prophetic archive consulted alongside it tells another. The question is why the second governed behavior more completely than the first. The foundational document of that archive is the Pseudo-Methodius Apocalypse. Originally composed in Syriac around 690 of the Common Era, probably in Mesopotamia, it was translated to Greek by the 8th century. It circulated in Byzantine court and ecclesiastical culture as a genuine prophetic vision from a 4th century bishop. Alexander's 1985 study of the Byzantine apocalyptic tradition identifies a consistent pattern of reception. Bonura's 2025 analysis of the text's Syriac origins confirms the same finding. Each era's anxieties recast the prophecy as a mirror of the present moment. The text's core claim was this: at the moment of the empire's greatest crisis, a last Roman emperor would arise. He would defeat the Islamic forces and restore Christendom before the final cosmic reckoning. The oracles attributed to the Emperor Leo VI reinforced this claim. Circulating from the 9th century onward, they predicted Islamic conquest of Constantinople, followed by Christian reconquest. Together, these traditions produced a 2-script system. Script A, the city will fall. Script B, the city will be restored. Both scripts produce the same behavioral posture. A prophecy that predicts both fall and restoration does not function as a warning against fall. The structural consequence for 1453 was precise. Decline was not a policy problem requiring solution. It was the divinely ordained precondition for promised rescue. The last emperor was coming. The question was not what to do. The question was who he would be. The name prophecy demonstrates how the framework converted specific information into confirmation. A widely circulating text predicted that Constantinople would fall under an emperor named Constantine, whose mother was named Helen. This echoed Constantine the Great and his mother Helena. Constantine XI's mother was Helena Dragas, a Serbian noblewoman. Barbaro records the match explicitly in his diary. The name match prophecy is unfalsifiable before the fact. Any Constantine with a mother named Helen fits the pattern. What matters forensically is the behavioral consequence. Sphrantzes records that before the final assault, the emperor told his commanders he was ready to die, that what would come would come. The named emperor in this system does not prevent the fall. He embodies it. The eclipse of the 22nd of May was the last omen in the sequence and the most precisely confirmed. Barbaro records the event. Runciman's correction, supported by astronomical records, places the date at the 22nd of May at a magnitude of 0.7446. Every defender on the walls saw it simultaneously. The prophecy it matched was named aloud. Barbaro records the emperor's understanding directly. On the same night, Ducas records the Hodegetria icon falling from its carrying frame during the processional circuit of the walls. Ducas alone among the primary witnesses provides this account. Barbaro, Dukas and the Slavic Chronicle and Sphrantzes all record a light over the dome of Hagia Sophia. The city filtered every event through a single lens. Every event confirmed what the lens predicted. The confirmation was real. It called for acceptance. The mechanism that produced paralysis was not ignorance. The leadership of Constantinople in 1453 possessed accurate information about its situation. Sphrantzes records Constantine XI refusing to melt church vessels of coin. The emperor knew the treasury was empty. Melting church vessels was politically impossible in a theocratic city-state. The same Sphrantzes had conducted the garrison census. The same emperor had watched Rumeli-Hisari rise from the city's walls. Urban had visited Constantinople before contracting with Mehmed. The court knew what cannon he would build. Constantine XI knew the garrison was insufficient and the treasury depleted. He knew the Black Sea route was closed. He knew the last crusade had been destroyed at Varna 9 years earlier. He proceeded. The diagnostic question is why. The Byzantine prophetic framework produced two scripts for the present situation. Script A, divine abandonment. The fall is decreed, the prophecies are being fulfilled. Script B, divine rescue. The last emperor is coming. The city will be restored. Both scripts produced the same behavioral posture. The task was witnessing what God had decreed with dignity. Neither script produced a call for political mobilization. The framework was not an irrational overlay on Byzantine political culture. It was Byzantine political culture. It governed which compromises were conceivable and which proposals were theologically tolerable. It determined which actions were intelligible to a population that had internalized it across generations. Byzantine history had validated the framework repeatedly. 2 Ottoman sieges had failed. The empire had survived its sack in 1204 and been reconstituted in 1261. By 1453, the framework had been confirmed by the history of the city itself. The Council of Florence provides the clearest forensic demonstration. The Union of Florence was signed on the 6th of July, 1439. Emperor John VIII had travelled personally to Italy to negotiate it. The agreement was this: church union with Rome in exchange for a Western crusade. Harris documents what followed in Constantinople. The population rejected it. The clergy boycotted it. Ducas records the declaration of Lucas Notaras, commander of the Byzantine fleet. Notaras stated he would rather see the Ottoman turban in Constantinople than the Latin mitre. The proclamation of the Union in Hagia Sophia on the 12th of December, 1452, was conducted in a near-empty church. This is not diplomatic incompetence. The Byzantine elite understood the mechanism. The union required theological compromise. The population for whom that compromise was required had internalized the same prophetic tradition. That tradition held that theological compromise was a form of divine betrayal. The diplomatic mechanism the empire needed could not be delivered. Donald Nicol argues in The Last Centuries of Byzantium that the fall was materially overdetermined by 1400. On his reading, the fiscal contraction, the Anatolian loss, and the Ottoman military trajectory made a different outcome implausible regardless of decisions taken in the 1440s and 1450s. This episode does not dispute the material conditions. It adopts Harris's reading as forensically prior to the central question. The question is why the prophetic framework made different decisions politically inaccessible. Whether different choices would have saved the city is a separate and harder problem. The material conditions and the cognitive framework are not competing explanations. The framework explains why the conditions were never addressed during the periods when addressing them might have changed the trajectory. The 1204 sack produces irreversible fiscal fragmentation. The 14th century civil wars open the Balkans to an Ottoman presence the empire cannot dislodge. The prophetic tradition encodes decline as the divinely ordained prelude to rescue. The reforms that might have arrested the decline become theologically intolerable. The Council of Florence fails because it requires precisely the compromise the tradition forbids. The garrison remains at 7,000. The walls remain unengineered for artillery. The Bosphorus closes. The cannon arrives. The city reads every development as confirmation of what has been written. It proceeds toward what it believes is already determined. The mechanism produced the sequence. On the 5th of April, 1453, Mehmed II arrived before the walls. The force is estimated across the siege accounts at between 60,000 and 80,000 men, accompanied by 69 cannon. The defenders numbered approximately 7,100. The bombardment opened on the 6th of April. The Mesotetian took concentrated fire. Crowley records the defenders filling breaches with rubble and timber overnight. The repair cycle held through April. It could not hold indefinitely. By the 22nd of April, the iron chain across the Golden Horn no longer mattered. The chain had protected the harbour approach in previous sieges. Mehmed ordered his fleet dragged overland on greased logs across the ridge north of the city. Barbaro records approximately 70 ships deposited inside the Golden Horn by the morning of the 22nd. The operation was conducted within observation range of the city walls. The chain remained stretched. It protected nothing. The 22nd of May was the night of the eclipse. The Hodegetria was processed. Ducas records the icon falling from its frame. He alone among the primary witnesses provides this account, and the event is uncertain. Barbaro, Ducas, and Nestor Iskander all record a light over the dome of Hagia Sophia. The city read the convergence as confirmation. The emperor proceeded. On the 26th or 27th of May, Giovanni Giustiniani was wounded. The Genoese commander had organized the defense of the Mesotikon sector throughout the siege. Sphrantzes and Ducas both record his withdrawal from the walls after the wound. The defensive coordination of the most exposed sector failed. The city held no reserve capable of replacing what Giustiniani had provided. On the evening of the 28th, Mehmed ordered the final assault for midnight. His forces rested and prepared. In Constantinople, Constantine XI conducted a final liturgy in Hagia Sophia, received communion and addressed his commanders. Sphrantzes records a version of the speech. The emperor did not claim rescue was coming. He asked his commanders to die with him if that was what the night required. The assault began at midnight. The Mesoteichon sector was breached. Ducas records a gate, the Kerkaporta, found open. Whether it was unlocked by accident or negligence, the sources do not agree. Ottoman forces were inside the walls before dawn. Constantine XI died fighting near the breach. No contemporary source identifies his body with certainty. Sphrantzes was not present when the emperor fell. Beyond that, the record is silent. The city fell before sunrise on the 29th of May. Hagia Sophia was converted to a mosque that same morning. Mehmed II entered the city that afternoon. Constantinople possessed, at the moment of its fall, more prophetic documentation of its own collapse than any medieval state in Christendom. Each signal in the archive was recognized, named, and recorded as it occurred. The leadership was not ignorant. The city's leaders were prepared, in the fullest sense, for what was coming. What they were not prepared for was the possibility that preparation, rather than passive reception, was the appropriate response. The diagnosis is this: prophetic inevitability as a substitute for adaptive capacity. The Omen framework encoded decline as the necessary precondition for divine rescue. It held both scripts open, fall and restoration, until the gates were physically breached. This framework made the required political compromises theologically intolerable and therefore politically undeliverable. Church union was surrender. Fiscal reform was impiety. The city read every sign. The readings produced acceptance. The pattern recurs. Han China's Court Astronomical Bureau catalogued comets, eclipses, and anomalous star positions through the 2nd century of the Common Era. These records appear in the Ho Hanshu. The empire was simultaneously fracturing under the Yellow Turban Rebellion. Accurate signal, no channel to adaptation. Western Rome in the 5th century maintained the Sibylline books and the priestly colleges. Jerome wrote his commentary on Ezekiel during the sack of 410 of the Common Era. He recorded the shock of a city whose institutional theology had promised what its institutions could no longer deliver. The pattern is, Omen systems maintained past the point where the institutions they presupposed have dissolved. The moon rises over Constantinople already in shadow. May 22nd, 1453. The emperor stands on the walls and understands what the eclipse has confirmed. He is right. He is operating in a system that has no channel between confirmation and action. The city falls 7 days later, at dawn, exactly as the prophecy said it would.